All right, now please join me in welcoming to the stage the co-chair of Open Book, Katie Poole.
Hi, good morning. Hi, okay, and I have rolled that it's right here. Yes, that I don't share. Okay, these are really important things. Closer, Katie.
So see if you can hear me now.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Okay. I am co-chair of Open Book this year, along with Arlene Withers, who is in the room here somewhere, working side by side with me. So I just want to point that out. Open Book is presented by the Pasadena Literary Alliance. And there are a couple things about the Alliance that I get to say right now. I just get a couple minutes before we bring the program out. The Alliance does three things. So the first thing we do is we celebrate authors. Of course, we bring authors to Pasadena, the very best authors that we can find, and celebrate authors. I'm going to not be out of breath. The second thing that we do is we create space for dialogue about literature. And that sounds complicated, except that's what you were just doing in the lobby. And that's what you're going to do when you leave here, is talk about books. And I just thought to myself, well, I want to make sure we acknowledge that this is Patriots Day. It's 9/11. And what could be better than creating community around literature and talking to each other about it. The third thing we do is we raise money for grants. We give our grants away every year, our money away every year, and we're proud to report that we have reached $500,000 into the community. That's it. So you can learn more about the Pasadena Literary Alliance by going to the website. There's a couple things on there that are worth going there for. One is all the videos of all of our past events that we could capture. So those are there and they're free, so please enjoy them. The second thing that's on the website that's important is a place to donate. In case you were a guest tonight and didn't get a chance to donate, that's there on the website. And there's also QR codes on the tables upstairs if you need help with that. And the third thing is that, why are we going to the website? Oh, here's why. Because you need to make sure we have your email. That's it. So why would you want us to have your email? Here's two reasons. One is we do a big, huge festival in the spring called the Pasadena Festival of London Authors. And this year it's on March 25th, 2025. What do you say? March 25th.
22nd.
Oh, it's 22nd. So now you're all going to be late. So, of course, it's on the 22nd. That's why we need to have your email so we can tell you. Tell you that. Okay. The other thing is that this is Open Book, and why would you want to know about Open Book? Because Open Book events are spontaneous. They're a little bit like a literary rave. And we don't know where we're going to be next. So we want to know how to reach you and tell you where we're going to be next. Open Book is a little different than the festival. So Open Book is any gender, any genre. So that's nonfiction, poetry, fiction. And also we meet in intimate spaces. But for this crowd, we had to have a little slightly less intimate. Usually we're 60 to 150. This time we're 2 something. So it's really exciting. But where are we? We're in A Noise Within. So thank you to A Noise Within for squeezing Okay, that's because we are squeezed in between the performance of Under My Skin, which is so exciting that we found this date to be able to be here. Okay, so other things to remember about the Pasadena Literary Alliance. It is a all-volunteer organization, and we have no employees. So you're surrounded by volunteers at the moment. So could all the volunteers please raise your hand for all of PLA, for the festival. Thank you so much to all the volunteers. And my last job is to thank our sponsors. We have 3 great sponsors. There's one that I'm not sure you've heard about. It's called My Zero Waste Store. And I don't know if you've been to in there. It's a retail store. It is next to the Pasadena Playhouse in the Playhouse District. The representatives are here. And this group, the My Zero Waste Store, they get plastic out of your life. So they get plastic out of your kitchen and out of your food. And you go in there and it's a retail store and they have tools for you to do that. So thank you to My Zero Waste Store. Oh. When you go back upstairs to buy books, the first 50 books have a little gift from the Zero Waste, so that's good. The second amazing sponsor is Craftsman Brewery, and Mark Jilk is here somewhere, the famous brewer. And talk about spontaneity, or is that the right word? Mark has been making Masumoto peach beer for years. And so if you were here early, you got a little taste of that, I hope. Thanks. It's just an amazing coincidence. Well, not a coincidence. We found them. And okay. And then the third thing and last is Overjoy Productions, which is a production company of Colleen Murray Payton. And she is here also, but she makes these fantastic videos for us with her husband, and they will make it possible to have this on the internet. So that makes for 3 sponsors. So now I need to make a comment about Red Hen Press. I'm so thankful to have them as a partner, and we want to thank them, especially Kate Gale, for helping us organize this event, but also to the staff that set up that bookstore and make it possible for everybody to buy the books. So thank you. And they are, by the way, celebrating their 30th year. They're a treasure. They're a nonprofit in a tough business, and they're in Pasadena. So we love that. So with no further ado, I'm going to introduce Kate Gale, who is the publisher of Red Hen Press, and she will forward the program. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm Kate Gale, publisher of Red Hen Press, and delighted to be here at the Pasadena Literary Alliance, and of course, especially delighted to be here at Noise Within, which is such a fabulous theater. Red Hen Press started 30 years ago. We started publishing in Los Angeles, and we've been in Pasadena for almost 15 years. It's amazing to have been publishing that long. Publishing on the West Coast is no easy feat. When we first started, a lot of publishers on the West Coast were going out of business. North Point, Black Sparrow, Capra. And when I announced that I wanted to get started in publishing, everyone told me that it was a terrible idea and that we would probably fail and that I was crazy. And I said, I already know that. The fact that we've lasted 30 years is because of persistence, hard work, and because we have an amazing team. And I want to say that being here in Pasadena has been fantastic. Pasadena is a city that loves the arts and cherishes culture and believes in making sure that arts organizations thrive. And we're very glad to be here in Pasadena. I want to say something about tonight's event, but I want to tell you about these 3 writers from an editor's point of view. I think that most people who would be introducing these writers would tell you about their long list of accomplishments, but if I began to do that, we'd be here till tomorrow morning. So I wanted to just tell you something briefly about what it's like to work with them as an editor. One of the things about writing is that it's something you do by yourself. When you work in theater or in music or in ballet or in any kind of dance or in film, You're working with a group of people to create art. When you're writing, you're by yourself in a room, and in that room, you're God. And when you emerge from that room, of course, you're still God. And so as an editor, I've had many people who are writers come up to me and tell me at great length how important they are. When Aimee came to talk to me about her book, she already had quite a number of best-selling books. She was already a legend. And when she came to give me the book that would become Glorious Boy, what she said was, I hope you'll find this book worthy of being published. I hope you'll like the writing. Now, at Red Hen, when we sit down to look at any manuscript and we're considering whether it's worth publishing at Red Hen, when it's a novel, what we ask ourselves, what we discuss is this as good as Glorious Boy? As far as we're concerned, Glorious Boy reset the bar of the kind of novels we wanted to publish. I hope all of you buy this book because this is a book that changed our whole press. When I think of this book, though, I like to think of its French title. Its French title is Le Garçon Magnifique. Because so many things are better in French. When I met up with Moss also completely failed to tell me how important he was. Moss is a third-generation Japanese peach farmer, already very well known for having changed much about the way farming was being done. He had a cookbook that so many of us who love cooking and baking, I'm quite a pie maker myself, very much loved. And the book that Moss wanted me to look at wasn't really about peach farming. It was about a lost aunt and his family. And we sat for hours talking about farming and about the Japanese removal and about this aunt. And during that time, I ate a whole bag of peaches. My first plan had been to bring the peaches back to the press, but that never happened. Moss just kept telling me stories. And the more he kept telling me stories, the more I fell in love with the idea of publishing a book. When I met Percival also was already a legend. At this point, he has more than 30 books published, has won many prizes. He's written children's books and poetry, and obviously many novels. But Percival just sat around with me and talked about training horses and mules and playing the piano and made me lunch. And I know it's starting to sound like the Red Hen writers just think that I don't eat enough. But Percival also was just telling stories. And what I'm trying to get to is this. The basis of a good press is never really building anyone's career. It's sitting around the campfires that we built at the very beginning of the world and telling stories. It's finding other people who also want to tell stories. It's sitting around with those stories. And then from those stories at the campfire, sometimes you go and take those stories and draw them on the walls of a cave, and then maybe on a scroll, and then maybe you take them into a book. And you get excited about those stories because stories change us. I was a little girl once living in a cult in southern New Hampshire. And one of the first stories I read as a little girl that I got excited about was The Ugly Duckling. Not because she became beautiful, because she learned to fly. And I thought sometime I will fly. And Toby Harper, who's my compadre, who's sitting around here somewhere, who helps me with running the press, is transformed by Stone Butch Blues. We are transformed by books because we find ourselves in a story. So running a press is about finding stories that will transform us. And that's why all three of these writers found a home at Red Hen. And that's why we're so excited that they're all here together to have a conversation with you. So you are sitting around a campfire tonight, a campfire of conversation. And with that, I'd like to welcome Aimee Liu, the author of The Garçon Manqué.
Thank you so much, Kate. It was quite a beautiful introduction. And it sort of sets me up for my first question, which has to do with being just a writer. A lot of us in this trade are just writers. We might have families or teaching jobs or, athletic interests. But when asked what we do, we say, I say often, I'm just a writer. These two are anything but just writers. I have to look at the list because it's so hard to remember how many other things. You both train mules and horses. Between you farm, ride, fly fish, paint, run a business. Percival, you're also a classical pianist, as well as a full professor at USC, and as Kate said, the author of over 30 books. So my first question to both of you is, where does writing fit into your hierarchy of needs, your Maslowian hierarchy of needs? Because it seems like there's not enough time in any given day for you to do the writing. So how does it all fit together, this great puzzle of life for you guys?
Still figuring that out. Yes. I don't think I would write if I didn't do other things. Writing is a part. I guess I'll speak about myself since I'm an authority in the guy. When I was a kid, the first novel I read was Somerset Maugham, the first novel. I read other things I read. The first novel I actually read, 9, was Somerset Maugham's Of Human Bondage. That thought it was at 9. Show. Yeah. And I did it secretly because I thought, wow, this is real. I shouldn't be reading this. So it's a prostitute in it. I looked up the word prostitute in the OED and still didn't know what it meant. Had the magnifying glass and I looked.
Oh, I see.
Okay. And but that covert reading stay with me. The reading is the most subversive thing we can be. No one sees what's going into. You have to reading the same text over your shoulder. They don't know what the work is doing to you. Writing might be the second most subversive we can do, but reading is what scares fascists. It's just why they rush to burn books. It's not because they're cold. It's they're afraid of me. And so I have the texts have become very important to me because basically subversive and Mike does forward.
How much of your life, in time-wise, do you devote to the writing part? Because there's so much else. It's just...
Well, I don't train horses anymore. I'm being trained by teenage boys. So I don't have to worry about that. I don't know when I work. We make our work. I stay up late. All of a sudden, there are pages. And I don't joke when I said that it's magic, because it is kind of magic to think of 500 blank pages suddenly filled with words. And that's suddenly I don't mean overnight. Wouldn't that would happen for me? But it's to see it come together. It's not easy, but it's miraculous to me that these things happen. I love that.
I think part of it too is, like Percival, I don't separate my writing from the rest of my life. They're woven together a lot. I remember when I grew up on a family farm, ran off because I never wanted the farm. Went to Berkeley, thought my parents would never come visit me at Berkeley. They never did. Then I went to Japan. It wasn't far enough away. Then I ended up working on our family's ancient rice farm in Japan. I realized I need to come back to our farm. And when I came back, I realized that I wanted to try to document the stories around us. So I started doing some oral histories, and I also started writing very bad poetry. These are like poetry from a bad country western song. You took my heart and stomped on it, type of language. But the idea was I didn't separate the work I was doing, my family, like family's history, from my writing. And I think I've continued that. So you ask, if you consider yourself a writer, yes and no, because it's so much infused in what I do and who I am. And that's why I take all of these notes a lot. So in one way, I'm writing throughout the day, just taking notes. Sometimes, at one point, I remember, I farmed full time. I used to write notes on the tractor fender in the dust. And I thought, that'd be great. And it was so appropriate because by the end of the row, new dust would cover my notes. It was very appropriate. I have my own editor. But it's this idea that I'm always a writer and always doing other things too, farming, family, community, other things too.
I was a painter in college, and I still do a lot of photography. And I have found that there's a tremendous amount of painting in my writing. And whether it's structure, whether it's the laying down of different layers of story, that is continuous learning from painting and bringing it into the writing. And, if I were still painting, I would probably bring the writing back.
Curious, what kind of painting? Was it oil, watercolors?
I started with oil and, yeah.
And the layers then.
Yeah.
Perfect for novelists, I would think.
Right. But so my question to you is, how do these other endeavors, for example, how does fly fishing affect or cross-pollinate your writing?
It makes the metaphor.
Yes, exactly.
It's great.
Fly fishing is good to do no matter what's going on. It's the detective work. You arrive at stream side and you observe the river. You make that assumption about where a trout might be. But then you sail the river and you look at the aquatic larvae and figure out what the trout are eating. And when I was a fanatic about it, I would make flies at streamside. But it's something far more basic in that it's in me. I love rivers. I can't look at a river. If I'm driving and I look down and see a river, I cannot look at it for more than a few seconds at a time. They're just too beautiful today, and the magnificence of them just captures me. But I have never made it back to my car. This is a lot like writing ballads. I've never made it back to my car at all. Because as I fish a river, every time I look ahead, there's a more promising spot. And as I move away, it gets later and later, and I think, well, it's time to head back. And when I turn around, it's a different river. And it works the same way. Every spot is more promising. And it's always dark when I get back, just the way it is when I finish novels. The light is closed in on me, and you hear the strange animal sounds coming out. And that's what.
Are you captivated by the river flow, by the color, the sound?
Everything about a river.
And last, I found when reading your descriptions of the pruning the trees and the old trees and sort of learning to love the old broken pieces and bringing I found myself thinking that your writing reflects that. There's a lot of that kind of weaving together the old and the new and sort of.
Well, I found as I've aged, I appreciate old things more. The idea that, we don't need to get rid of the old to be more productive. But one of the interesting dynamics in our lesson, we have some very old heirloom varieties of peaches. And one variety we have, they've been in the ground for 60 years. I helped plant them. It's fun to go back and know I planted this row with my dad. His rows were straight and mine were crooked. I wanted to get out of the field. I didn't want to do that. But part of the dynamics, though, was the idea of the deep rootedness of these trees. But the flip side, and then maybe Percival, it's very similar. When you prune, it's the art of seeing the future. Because when you prune, you have to be able to envision the summer sunlight penetrating the tree. And there's this ecologist that described it about rings of light. So as the sun goes over the horizon, rings of light penetrate the outside and the interior of the tree. And if you could see that, then you could prune better. Because you could see what branches are going to catch this light and how it all works. And it's magical to me because you're always looking to the future, always seeing the next bend in the river and thinking that there's another place to go fish, there's another place to explore, another place to see the future while I pray.
That's great. And there are no more places in your writing to explore too. And editing, of course, is like pruning. So I also want to kind of bringing this along to the idea of code switching. When I was writing Glorious Boy, code switching was a very big part of the story because there's lots of different cultures in the book. And also there's a mute child at the heart of the story who lives by his own code. And he's attuned to one character and not his mother, which is a real problem. So that there's a silent code that he and the little girl who takes care of him understand. And so as I was writing this book, I thought a lot about all the codes that are woven through our lives and all the code switching that we ordinarily do. When we talk to a different generation, we switch codes. When we talk to our lawyer, we switch codes. My grandfather was a classical Chinese poet, so he had there's a whole code for classical poetry in China that nobody else can speak. And there's a lot of reasons, a lot of motivations are woven into all these different codes. And of course, it's something that you guys both write about in your work in relation to race, in relation to agriculture, and ethnicity, and geography as well, and class, of course. I think that although we all do it for a variety of reasons, it has to do a lot with connection and clarity, but also for control and safety. And Percival, you play with code switching so much in your books, and it's done very overtly and intentionally with regard to power dynamics of racism and discrimination. I think particularly was really central in Erasure and James. And I just wonder if you could tell us sort of how you came to that theme and how you see code switching working in the world, for better and for worse.
In my novel, James, the enslaved people, they speak to the slave owners in a way that establishes their inferiority to the owners. They do this for their own safety, so that they are not objects to people to fear, so that they can move safely to the world. Enslaved people, imprisoned people, oppressed people find a way to speak to each other always that does not allow entry of the people who are oppressed.
Yeah.
In the novel, it just happens to be standard English. But I don't know what the language they would have used that was private would sound. In the novel, they use standard English, and it serves my purposes because there's a comic element to it, but it also drives home the point that enslaved people are complex, complicated human beings, and they are not the simple-minded, superstitious people that are represented in our literature. So the code switching is in this case not only the true representation of how people behave, but also a way for me to address, I think that's just how it's been done, not to enslave people, but to the descendants of people who were enslaved, because the stories that were since.
Mas, the code that fascinated me, there were many in your book, but Secret Harvest, but the one that fascinated me was your Aunt Shizuko's own code. She reminded me of the little boy in my book because she certainly had a very, very powerful silent language of her own. So just so you know, Mas's aunt had meningitis at age 2 and lost her ability to speak at that point. And then at 5, because of the war and the internment camps, she was placed in the care of California and taken away from the family. So then she was estranged from the family until she was died.
70 years later, we get a phone call that she's alive a few miles from our farm. So you have to deal with that whole hidden family secret. But the dynamic of code switching, because it took me a long time to sort of uncrap this, and with it came this other layer of Percival is absolutely right. We constantly code switch, but we often don't think of the emotional value that's layered upon that. In this case, it was blatant. You know, you have a sister and aunt that everyone assumes she died, and now she's alive. What do we do with her? What's the shame that's involved with her? What's the historical context of that? And try to understand what was the codes of being a person with a disability in the Great Depression in the 1940s during the war. And at first, when I was writing this, I was mad. You know, I got mad and told my mom, you know, why did you just let her go? And here's the wild thing. She just looked at me in silence. And it occurred to me, there's another code going on. And it was that code of silence. It created our Japanese American family, very rural family too. And also, I think, layered upon that, because my dad, for example, was not a storyteller. He wasn't the old farmer that said, well, let me sit down and I'll tell you a whole story of, you know, when we had mules and horses. He said hardly anything to me. In fact, I think in his adult life, he read 3 books and 2 of them were mine. He wasn't a reader, you know. But his code was silence. And it took me a long time to interpret that and figure out what was going on. And layered upon that was the internment of Japanese Americans, where you were imprisoned as an American citizen. My mom was 13, a freshman in high school, and was labeled the enemy. And then she had to go live in this, you know, concentration camp for 4 years. She came back very silent. They talked with their friends, of course, but publicly, they never talked about internment with us growing up. There was a silence that penetrated our family. But at the same time, there was meaning in that. And it was up to me to figure out what was the code. And as I farmed more, I think I got better at understanding that kind of silence, like the silence on a farm. And there really isn't silence on the farm. You have to start listening, and you could hear sounds, you could hear, you know, dogs barking, you could hear some the wind in the leaves. And how can I understand that silence? I'll give you an example. This last summer, it was record heat in July. I think all of us experienced that record heat. It was the hottest July ever recorded. Our beaches, I thought, were going to just really, really crumble in this heat. They were fine. Because we watered deep, I think that, and these are old trees, they were fantastic. Flavor was amazing. They actually relaxed during this heat. And I remember going out in the fields, and you could almost hear the heat rising up out of the field. And it's like, how can you hear the sound of heat? You could hear it out the field. And the trees are saying, we're going to take a siesta in the afternoons. And I said, great, because I don't want to work at 115 degrees either. But it was this kind of ability to listen to the codes that are switching. And I certainly know as climate change hits, we're going to have to learn to listen to those codes even more.
Back to Aunt Shizuko. Her code was through motion, really. And she had a whole language in terms of the way she moved. And it took you a long time. Well, I mean, fortunately, you had a long time. You had several months with her before she died, so that you
couple of years.
And a couple of years, was it?
An example, I don't, obviously, she doesn't know who I was. So I go up to meet her the first time. I'm your nephew. Obviously, she doesn't know who I am at all. And she looks at me, and again, she had an intellectual disability. She couldn't speak. So she looked at me, and she was in a wheelchair at this time in a assisted care center. And she kicked me. And I went, is she pissed off that we didn't look for her or something? No, she wanted a shoe top. She was very, very assertive. This little tiny woman, 4'4", 90 years old at that time, wants a shoe tie, so she kicks you. And then I found out from the staff that she was assertive like that. And I kept saying, this is the image of older Japanese American women. This is not the Marie Kondo style woman. But she was assertive like that. And that's how she survived 70 years of institutional care. And she was able to assert herself in a very sweet way because the caregivers loved her and she loved them.
I felt as you learned to speak her language, that it affected you as well in terms of your understanding of this business of how we communicate with the world and how it's a two-way conversation with all kinds of things of movement and sound and
it's part of paying attention. And especially post-pandemic, we've sort of lost our ability to have conversations and pay attention. And we're caught up a lot in social media, and I totally understand all of that. But there is this dynamic, and I think Percival would agree, writers, we kind of pay attention to the world around us, and that's how we write notes, that's how we create characters, storylines, and advanced settings for our characters and our stories. I think that's the key to start understanding those dynamics, and that's what Shizuko taught.
Yeah. Before we leave the code switching issue, I want to talk about it in relation to the authentic voice. As writers, most writers are always sort of trying to cultivate the authentic voice, trying to identify their own authentic voice. When you're a young writer, you're trying to create your own authentic voice or find it. And this, I felt like, was an issue at the heart of Erasure in particular, where there were all these codes that were sort of being imposed on the characters in the novel. And your protagonist, of course, is trying to write his own authentic voice and get it out in the world and have it accepted. And sort of there's this other code that's imposed on him, and he reacts by lampooning it, and then that's identified as his authentic voice. So could you talk about, are these codes helpful or hurtful to us? I mean, we can't avoid them. They're all around us, and they're influencing us all the time, and they're sometimes being imposed on us. So how do we navigate it? Arguably, Monk's chosen authentic voice also comes from European classical literature, though his influences were elsewhere as well. What do you think?
I put no stock at all in Oppen because, just be honest. You write what you like, you write what you believe, and you write it the way you would say it.
Okay.
Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't times when you might adopt another voice to make a point, but to adopt another voice thinking you're going to create something that's authentic is naive and maybe vain. All you can do is write what's true. And truth and authenticity are not the same things, especially the way it's used in our culture. Just what is an authentic Black voice? As soon as I say it, that's the most racist shit. It doesn't make any sense at all. Yet, in this culture, people walk around looking for that sort of thing. When I was a kid, I would go to the bookstore and I would look for, I read every Kurt Vonnegut book ever written about. Herman, that's all the stuff from the 60s and 70s, and I would look for works that meet in the middle class Black kid from 3 generational adopters. The only Black people I could find in novels on the shelves were from the antebellum South and some fictitious inner city North. Neither one of them were my world, and one of them was both of them were complete fabrication. So where was I? The fact that America would look at me and say, "Who's your Black leader?" Oh, I would turn right back to the white person and ask her, "Who's your white leader?" Those questions don't make sense, but this construct of race creates these questions so that America, for lack of a better term, which can put us sometimes. My Native friends feel it all the time. Why should someone, a Seminole, the Everglades, think that they're supposed to in any way resemble a Cheyenne?
I would like to read a passage that really resonated with me, Charlie Secret Harvests, and I think it applies to both of your work. Maz writes, "We are bonded by a shared baggage of history we cannot escape. Many will press on and carry this burden. We have an attachment to the dreams of our immigrant parents and grandparents, yet sense they are destined to be broken. A new precariousness slips into our lives. Our plans and hopes endure alongside the fantasy of what might have been." So my question to you, and I think about this a lot in terms of my own writing too, because I write a lot of my father's Chinese American history. Do you find this baggage of history a burden, or does it serve a more uplifting, generative role, especially in your writing, maybe even for cultivating resilience?
Oh, I think it's all of the above. Because I can't help, because I'm close to family, I farm land that's been farmed for generations, that thinking of the ancestral dynamics of it. When you farm with the geography and the geology of centuries before you. So when we're in a drought, you begin to say, we need to pay attention to aquifers and water. So all that baggage of history is part of who I am. And here's the fun thing, it's part of all of our food. Everything we eat carries the baggage of history in it, but we tend to commodify it instead. But I think it's about relationships, and that's the key. And one of the breakthroughs for me in terms of writing was to realize writing isn't a transaction, it's about relationships. And it shifted how I suddenly saw the world. Because I was going into journalism at one point, thinking, writing the newspaper reporter or broadcast media. And I shifted because I think I was too reflective. I wanted to spend time on a story. I wanted to reflect more, get the backstory more, the baggage of a story, which unfortunately I'm sure journalists struggle with because they love to do that, but they don't have the time and the resources to do it. So yeah, it's all part of the blessing that I have and the curse that I have, and that's probably why I write.
And this shows up in several of your books, I think, some more than others, but especially in James. I mean, it's you were literally answering the fantasy of what might have been by giving James a voice on a page that he didn't have in Mark Twain's original. And of course, you were also dealing with the baggage of history in terms of Mark Twain's book itself by rewriting that. So you tell us about what specifically triggered the idea to write this book, this particular one.
Good. I'm going to disappoint you. I always wish I had some romantic answer. Like it was burning in me for years to write this novel.
Let's touch that.
Truth of the matter is I was playing tennis and I hit the ball wildly out of the court and I watched the ball sail and I thought, has anyone ever told the story of about Jen? Which explained why I hit the ball so poorly. And I went home and I started studying, and I found that it turned out that I couldn't find that anyone had done this, at least not the story. There was not a short story about the older Jim after all of this upset. But as I started working on it, I thought the depiction of enslaved people in this book is one of superstitious, simple-minded people. And of course, they weren't. They mislead. And so I wanted to correct that, but I didn't want to write a corrective to Twain, who I admire greatly. You know, I read up then as a young boy, an abridged version. I didn't know what abridged meant. But it was, you know, early on, it was then, and then later I came to it and understood the importance of it as a young America dealing with the most defining feature of the American experience, which is race. And this character has no agency in the novel. And I thought, well, I need to be able to get an agency. And then as I was working on it, I realized I don't need to get an agency. He has it. He just has no method of expressing. And so that's what the novel became.
So related to code, I guess, as writers, there's the issue of genre. And both of you switch genres in the same way that we code switch in language. A lot of authors complain about being pigeonholed into genres. And you defy categorization, both of them. Mas, you combine memoir with poetry, recipes, environmental science, and organic farming. And Percival, you pop from poetry to whispers to satire to mystery and thrillers. Is there an element of protest to all this genre switching, or do you want that naturally to you?
But I think it's part of what's natural, but it's partly guided by opportunities. You know, again, Red Hen working with Kate and Secret Harvest, I didn't know where to go with this book, and it turned out to be great. So you just follow that path with that. One of the things that was unique about Secret Harvest is I wanted to have artwork in it. So I worked with this brilliant illustrator because I wanted imagery along with my words. And then just like right now, very brief, I'm working with the Fresno Philharmonic because I wrote a libretto about 4 generations of Jackson American farm women that their 2 composers are making into a 20-minute orchestral composition that we performed in a couple months. Where they're following this story, and it's about the seasons. And this is so exciting to me, not because I'm a musician at all, but I love the idea of words taking this new life which I think they always have. But in the world we're in today, with a lot of technology, communication, imagery flowing in there. So my dream is that, and I'm going to do a small booklet with it, that you can read the book, because it's very short, in 20 minutes, or you're listening to the musical composition going over 4 seasons. And one of the fun things working with the composers was they came to the farm at blossom time, and we posed the question, what's the sound of a peach blossom opening? Is it a crackle? Is it a pop? Is it a slow opening? And what's the instrument that goes with it? So the libretto begins with my grandmother and arriving in America in the brutal heat of summer picking raisins. So the imagery of it is this heat that the immigrants first arrive in, and that's how they plant their roots in this heat. So what's the sound of a Fresno summer heat in the raisins? And that's what I've heard pieces of it, and I love it, but I'm anxious to see what the final composition is.
Any protest in your jumping through all of these genres?
Oh, sure.
Please.
But that's nothing that can really be articulated. I'm just a cranky, and I hate being told I can't do something. And as I tell my fiction, if you write a poem that's 15 lines long and say it's a song, someone can say, no, that's not a song. Or if you don't comply with those 2 Cohen rules about writing a villanelle, then they'll say it's about villanelle. But if you give somebody 20 pages of fiction, no matter how bad it is, no matter what it does, there is nothing they can say to you. They can't say it's not a story because there are no rules. And so I like to exploit that truth. There are no rules. As long as I can get away with it, I can do it.
Is satire your normal MO for thinking and for life, or is it something that just is on the page?
Well, I'm pathologically ironic. But in irony is a respect for earnestness. Irony just in space is just comedy. And satire for the sake of just making fun of something is just being mean. I think most real writers want to advance the conversation, and that's what I hope that I could just go.
First of all, are you impatient or are you patient?
Yes. I think I'm patient. I'm probably not the one to say. Let me call my son. No, well, if you're trained, if you work with animals, you're not going to be doing it long if you're that patient. Especially when they're 1,200 pounds. In fact, you were saying about code switching. I had a life change some 20 years ago, right before I met my wife, where I left my ranch and I was told to do this bike. And I love more than all of my animals, monk. This is that Devonius monk. Was afraid of hypodermic needles. When I got him, he was afraid of a lot of things, and I retrained him. But what I couldn't get him to relax with was my. If I did that with nothing in my hands, he would just go crazy. The vet wouldn't come near him to give him shots, so I had to give the shots, and it was always a fight. And I was depressed. I was not happy. And one day I said to my vet, "You're gonna give him the shot today. I'm tired." And I put a big heavy halter on and ran a chain over his leg and snapped him up high on a tree. And he said, "Come on, Urgent." And the vet approached, and he started to go crazy. And a little blood trickled down his lip. And I saw this animal think. It went through his eyes, and I saw it happen. And the mule thought, Plan A is not working. And he stopped. And he didn't move a muscle while he received the shot. And the lesson to me was, my unhappiness was, Plan A is not working. And so I set about changing my life. So,
So that's the two got the problems I could.
That is a serious story, not satire, not ironic.
I'll tell you what the mule was wearing.
But I did want to follow up on that because I'd love to hear your thoughts on how humor affects the dark issues that you write about a lot. That very, racism, slavery, discrimination writ large. And yet your books are so funny. And I don't write funny personally, so I don't really understand how that world works. But how do you think it affects our ability to absorb or deal with those heavy topics?
I back to Mark Twain, my sense of humor shaped by three sources: my father, Mark Twain, and Bullwinkle the Moose. What humor does is it you can get someone laughing, then you can get them to relax. And once they're relaxed, you can do other more nefarious stuff too. And that's what I count on. But there's also injustice and inequality, awful things, the absurdity. And that's where the humor resides. And that's why we have gallows humor. That's why that's why slaves would joke about slavery. That's why people on death camps had humor. Because this is how we as people survive the really awful things, is by recognizing the absurdity. Go on.
So my question is for Mr. Everett. I love your book, James, and I am intrigued by your feeling of your relationship with Mark Twain. Did your sense of him and what was happening in his mind, in his life, change as you were writing the book? What do you think of Mark Twain as an inspiration? Let's see.
I love Twain's work. I didn't like Sept as a novel. It's like the novel. Like the Mississippi and Roughing It were really important books to me because I learned a lot about humor and about the irony that we need to move through the world. And again, I didn't see myself as writing it. I see not as a corrector, but as entering a conversation. I wrote the novel that Twain was equipped to a. And I don't mean that to be unfair, Alan, because I have another 140 years of human development at my disposal that allows me to see the world in a different way. And hopefully, though it's not evident usually, or Ant's way, because we people, evolutionists of slow shit. But I really respect love Twain.
Thank you. Who else has a question?
Excuse me, what?
Yes. Okay, do you want to stand up?
Have two.
Hi, my book club read his book, James, and we enjoyed it. Me and our here, she'll copy this. We discussed how did James become literate, and it was not mentioned in the book. I'm just explaining what people write at the end. What the system house and James that we had all kinds of suggestions. But I'd like to hear your perspectives.
There are many people who have taught themselves to read, that he became lawyers and judge statutes library.
Stocks that read that.
It's there is and there were a number of very great slaves. Denmark Vesey, who led a slave revolt unsuccessfully, was not only literate but wonderfully philosophical in his understanding of the world. And the way that was taken from him was the confession attributed to him by his white captors. So it's not that, and there are all sorts of kinds of literacy. The engagement with ideas is a kind of literacy. The ability to discuss these things, and of course, enslaved people were capable of doing that and did.
Thank you.
Please.
Other questions? Yes. So I'm not going to take the stairs. We'll still be much
Seconds. For Mr. Everett, I loved the book, James, and I've really broken my budget by giving him his gift as the Vegeta. And I have heard that you were going to be involved in making a movie of it. And I hope you won't mind my asking. I'm particularly interested in whether or not you're going to write it and who might be attached to it, because it's such it's an interesting change in process and what your opinion of that is, how you're looking forward to it or not.
I am signed on to write the screenplay for it. I was hoping to work with someone a little more established, but it turns out it's a guy named Steven Spielberg. Why not?
Is there a director involved?
No one is officially attached to it, though. I just had lunch the other day with Taika Waititi.
Thank you. Oh, the princess. All right. Other questions? Yes. You want to stand?
Stop the school.
Hi, I originally had a question about Dr. Nova's favorite book, but seeing all three of you here, I see a common theme in which you all write about is sharing secrets. So I just wanted to know, how do you go about doing that in your writing? I remember, 2 years ago, I met Moss, and Moss asked us at our table, to share a secret. And I thought it was very, intimate to do that kind of thing. But, telling a whole audience your secret, that's, when you do it in a book, how does that factor into your writing?
One of the themes of Secret Harvest was the idea that every family has secrets. And once you acknowledge that, the secret you share, then we begin to understand that that's part of normal behavior of life. And secrets don't necessarily have to be a negative, something that needs to be hidden. At some readings that I've done, I ask the audience in a similar way, write a secret that you want to tell and share, and promise you're going to share it with your family. And then I would collect the cards. And one of the best ones was someone said that they grew up, it was a young Latina. She said she grew up and her mom always said that her grandfather, the mom's dad, was dead. And she goes, imagine then when I went to go into Mexico and visit my aunt said, would you like to meet your grandfather? These are family secrets that necessarily aren't evil. There's some history. It's the baggage of history that we all carry, and it actually defines who we are.
Yeah. I agree with what Moss just said. I think every family has these secrets, and I think that one of the things that interests me in writing about them is that those secrets have hidden repercussions. I think they affect, especially within the context of a family, but also within the context of history. There's so many repercussions that we are living, the successors are living with, that are caused by the secrets, and people don't even realize it. And the whole dynamic of a family can be created by these secrets. And the family is so confused, and there's so much tension and so much conflict that a lot of which is, once you know the secrets, it's all unnecessary, and a lot of pain is caused by that. And that's what interests me, and that's why, for one thing, a secret is a mystery. So who doesn't like mystery? But it's those hidden repercussions that really fascinate me.
I could tell you what I think, but it's sick. So I asked me what I watch, what I want to teach my sons. One of the things I want to teach them is it's okay to have something that's theirs that I don't know. It's their secret. I don't. It's their work. Diane Arbus, I use this in a book someplace, but I can't remember. Diane Arbus said, the photograph is a secret about a secret. I've been trying to figure it out. Like, it's true. Yeah. I know it's true, but I can't say why.
Thank you.
It's pretty. I just had a question. Did you go to the Mississippi River or spend any time there before writing this? Because the imagery was wonderful.
I at some time on the Mississippi, I actually did go to Hannibal, and I don't encourage anybody to go. It's not terrible for $1. There were a lot of gift shops that Wayne stuff, but it wasn't at all profitable. But yes, I thank you.
Okay, great. Last question. Okay.
It seemed like for the first half or so of James, it followed the story of Huck Finn pretty closely, and then it went off in its own direction. Was that always the intention, or as you were writing it, did it kind of happen organically?
Well, I didn't want to retell the adventure of Pillsbury Chat, but I did want to inhabit that world. And to achieve that, I read Huck Finn 15 times in a row. The last word, go back again, until I was sick of it. And I was sick of it about time 4. And I can honestly tell you, I will never reread. But I did this again so that I would have no loyalty to the text, but only to the world. I knew what was happening in it, and I read it until it became nonsense to me. I put it down, and I never looked at Huck Finn again once I stole the novel. And there are things that are very close with him, because it should be that way. But the mere change of point of view changes the whole story. And I was confident in that. The events don't make his story, it's perception of it.
Thank you so much for your questions. Aimee, I'm going to turn it back to you to close.
I thank Percival and Moss and Red Hen and Pasadena Literary Alliance and all of you for coming out. I believe that all of the books are for sale out in the lobby, and we will all be there to sign your copies if you so wish. So thank you so much.
Well, they yes, it's good.